Welcome to PandaAudioBooks, the perfect place for a huge collection of fantasy novels. If you enjoy my content and want to support my work, a small contribution via PayPal is greatly appreciated. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notifications bell to stay updated with our latest audiobook chapters. When Xianxia saw Han Li within the transportation formation, his eyes widened and his face twitched. Although he had been confused as to why Han Li would seek his own destruction by hiding on this small island, it was beyond his wildest dreams for a transportation formation to be there. Before his eyes, Han Li cast a series of hand incantations and spat out a mouthful of blood essence. He was sparing none of his true essence to hasten the activation of the transportation formation, which had already begun to hum "No." Xianxia furiously roared. He instantly opened his mouth and fiercely shot a ball of azure light towards a corner of the formation. If the formation was broken before the activation completed, Han Li was as good as his. Immediately after unleashing the attack, Xianxia's body blurred as he madly rushed at the formation with a fervent bloodlust in a desperate attempt to interrupt Han Li's teleportation. However, he was too late. Han Li responded to his attack by shooting over 10 streaks of sword chi to slow down the ball of azure light. As for Xianxia's mad charge, Han Li didn't possess the slightest intention to dodge. The spell formation had already begun to shine with a dense white light, enveloping Han Li within it. When Xianxia arrived in front of the transportation formation in his mad rush, Han Li had already disappeared from within the light in a series of blurs. With neither a displacement talisman on hand nor knowledge of where the transportation formation led to, Xianxia was forced to abandon his pursuit. At that moment, Swift Crane flew in through the shattered ceiling. After seeing the faint glow of white light from the formation, his expression immediately revealed both fury and amazement. Unfortunately for Swift Crane, his sudden appearance had made him the new target of Xianxia's gaze. Killing intent began to emanate from his blood-red eyes. "All the humans here will die." Brimming with rage after Han Li escaped right before his eyes, Xianxia brutally shouted. His entire body blazed with an azure light, and instantly turned into a streak of azure light, pouncing towards Swift Crane in a display of overbearing ferocity. Swift Crane's expression massively changed at the sudden change of events, and he instinctively threw out his ancient mirror and jade hammer in panic. Beams of different colors burst forth from the cave and intertwined as they shone down upon the previously tranquil island. A month later, the human cultivators in the nearby seas heard that the nascent soul cultivator Daoist Master Swift Crane fleshly body had been exterminated by a grade 9 demon beast. In order to survive, he had to exhaust the entirety of his body to transport his nascent soul back to his cave residence. For a while after this event, human cultivators were left trembling in fear at the demon beast's viciousness. However, none of them could have expected that such a momentous event was only the beginning. Several months later, the flood dragons of the depths suddenly dispatched large quantities of high-grade members to scour the seas, hunting all human cultivators at core formation and beyond. Although this only lasted for a few short years, the devastation it caused among high-grade cultivators was comparable to the beast torrent. There were even 2 nascent soul eccentrics that had met their end after being surrounded by several grade 9 demon beasts. From that moment on, whenever word of any flood dragons appeared in the nearby seas, no humans dared to rashly leave their cave residences. This continued for over 10 years before the lingering fear finally started to fade. However, the few cultivators that had been fortunate enough to escape from the demon beast's hands were bewildered to discover that all of them were searching for a core formation cultivator surnamed Li. Anyone remained silent in the face of flood dragons' interrogation about him would find themselves immediately attacked. As a result, many cultivators came to believe that the massive wave of attacks from the flood dragons was likely a result of this cultivator Li. Just what had this person done to enrage the flood dragons to this degree? When word of this spread, it became common to hear people cursing this unknown cultivator for having invited this calamity upon all of them. It reached the point where everyone wanted to find this cultivator Li and capture him, delivering him to the flood dragons as an apology and to appease their rage. However, everyone was bewildered to discover that there was no one by the name of Li among the higher grade cultivators. So even if they wanted to apprehend him for his offenses, they were incapable of even trying. In a flash of white light, the now infamous Han Li appeared in an unfamiliar place with a greater displacement medallion in hand. As a result of his careful nature, Han Li had already prepared for the possibility of meeting enemies upon arrival and had preemptively changed his appearance to that of an unfamiliar man. Before he had even managed to recover from the dizziness caused by the teleportation, Han Li heard a lazy voice from his side. "It seems that your esteemed self has a penchant for punctuality as well. You and I were the first to arrive, and are stuck waiting on the others." Upon hearing this, Han Li inwardly trembled and grunted in response before moving off of the formation and standing off to the side. Not far from the transportation formation, there was a black-clothed man wearing a hood that grinned upon seeing Han Li, revealing his gleaming white teeth. However, when Han Li clearly saw this person's appearance, he immediately felt his stomach lurch. The man appeared truly frightening with a face so shriveled he looked like a skeleton. Additionally, his eyes twinkled with a faint blue light. Despite his shock, Han Li didn't dare to scorn him, because he could tell at a glance that this skeletal-looking man was a mid-core formation cultivator. He could already be considered a rarely seen high-grade cultivator among the scattered star seas. At the same time that Han Li saw his face, the skeletal man realized Han Li was a late-core formation cultivator. Astonishment clear in his eyes, his tone became much more respectful as he continued. "The others should be arriving soon, so please feel free to take a short rest, brother. We can look forward to all of the rewards we will reap from the upcoming operation, he." Han Li was at a loss about what to do, but under such vague circumstances he could only nod his head and maintain his stiff expression to avoid making any mistakes. He felt his heart slightly relax after examining his surroundings, and discovering that they matched the description of Bright Emperor Island that Lady Fan had given him. When the exquisite sound sect disciple had said that the transportation formation was untested, Han Li had felt slightly uneasy. In the end his luck held out and he had truly returned to the inner star seas after all these years. He was currently in a cave over 60 meters wide, and apart from the ancient transportation formation that he had appeared from, Han Li saw 2 additional transportation formations in the cave. While Han Li chatted with the skeletal man, another transportation formation flickered with yellow light, faintly revealing a tall silhouette. The black-robed man's eyes immediately brightened and he hurriedly walked over. Han Li took the opportunity to quietly shoot 2 small streaks of azure light from his legs into the transportation formation below him, creating a crack in it that would be difficult to spot. As a result of this small crack, the ancient transportation formation was disabled and he no longer had to fear any pursuit from either Swift Crane or Fengxi. It appeared that Han Li's covert sabotage had gone unnoticed by both the black-clothed man and the cultivator that had just arrived. While the two of them were lively bantering with each other, Han Li inspected the new arrival and discovered it was a large man with a fiendish appearance. When Han Li saw them speaking with each, he silently walked down from the transportation formation and headed towards the cave opening. However, he had only walked a few steps before he heard the black-robed man soar with an astonished tone. "Brother, not everyone has arrived yet. I was told that there would be 5 people simultaneously taking action, and the rest of our orders and members have yet to arrive. It would be best for us to wait in the cave for the time being. Otherwise, it will be hard to explain. Now that I think about it, fellow Daoist's appearance is quite unfamiliar. Is there any chance that this is the first time that brother has participated in an operation like this?" For some unknown reason, the black-robed man hadn't doubted Han Li's identity since he arrived despite not recognizing him. Han Li slightly frowned at the question before mumbling with a deliberately impatient voice, "How troublesome, none of this was explained to me." He. Since fellow Daoist's cultivation is quite high, it is only natural for your guide to be hesitant in telling you what to do. However, brother should exercise some patience. So long as you complete your task, you're free to do as you wish. The black-robed man faintly smiled and seemed to be implying something. When Han Li heard this, he managed to come up with a fairly certain idea about what was going on. After slightly rolling his eyes, he intended to give a vague response, but right then another transportation formation began to radiate light before bringing forth 2 more people. A strange expression flickered deep within Han Li's eyes upon seeing the new arrivals. One of whom was an old man who had blue flame emblems that emitted a faint spiritual chi, and flickered as if they were alive embroidered on his wide robes. Based on his appearance he seemed to be some notable character, while at his side stood a lean, elegant man. With the appearance of these 2, There were now 5 people in the cave, and Han Li was the sole late core formation cultivator. The skeletal man was at mid-core formation, while the large man and the old man were both at early core formation. As for the lean, elegant man, he was only at the late foundation establishment stage. Just like the skeletal man and the fiendish man, the new arrivals didn't ask any questions about Han Li's identity either. When the elegant man saw that there were 5 people present, he directly saluted the 3 people that had arrived earlier and respectfully said, "I am Ku Yu. With respect, I've come to deliver your orders and guide you. Here is my proof of identity. Please feel free to confirm it." The elegant man then took out a black command medallion and handed it over to Han Li. As he clearly had the highest cultivation among the 3 that had first arrived, he naturally took the leading position. Han Li wordlessly received the medallion and glanced at it before casually tossing it to the skeletal man. The skeletal man took a cursory glance at it as well and then casually tossed it back to the elegant man. He then said with a lazy tone, "What use is there in showing the command medallion? Since a foundation establishment cultivator such as yourself was allowed to use the teleportation formation, there is little doubt about your role. As for our identities, there is also no use in examining them. We've only arrived here due to receiving orders as enforcers. It is impossible for there to be outsiders. So how about you start telling us our orders?" The skeletal man appeared quite familiar with the process and boldly spoke with an expression of impatience. When the elegant man heard this, he hesitated for a moment before revealing an embarrassed smile. He didn't raise the matter about identifying Han Li or the others and only let out a dry cough before introducing the old man at his side. "This is Senior Ding, an enforcer of the Azure Yang sect. Your assignment is to assist Senior Ding in capturing a criminal of the Azure Yang sect." Senior Ding will continue with the details. This junior's role was merely to introduce him. He then obediently stepped back and deferred to the old man beside him. "Azure Yang sect? Don't tell me that it's Lord 3 Yang's Azure Yang sect." A blue glint appeared in the skeletal man's eyes as he revealed astonishment. When Han Li and the fiendish man to his side heard this, they also revealed surprise. The Azure Yang sect elder surnamed Ding faintly smiled and saluted the 3. "He, it seems there is no need for me to speak of my sect's founder since you already know his name. The martial ancestor has personally requested coalition leader Archsaint 6 Paths for this matter. This is due to the fact that not only is the criminal a core formation cultivator, but she is also in possession of many of the Azure Yang sect's most valuable treasures. It has already been many years since she escaped, but we recently acquired word of her whereabouts. Had the martial ancestor personally set out to capture her, it would naturally be quite easy, but unfortunately, he has more pressing matters at hand. As such, he was forced to ask you fellow Taoists for assistance. With us 4 core formation cultivators, we will be able to capture that which alive with certainty." When he said that last sentence, his expression subconsciously became stern. After hearing him say which, the fiendish man bewilderedly asked, "Is this criminal a female cultivator?" Han Li frowned, having faintly recalled something. "That's right, the witch is called Yuan Yao. Originally, she was a concubine that was prepared for the young sect master. However, it was beyond our expectations that this witch would be so vicious and merciless, and using her outstanding beauty and bewitchment techniques, she conspired with another woman and killed the young sect master in secret. Yuan Yao then took the young sect master's treasures and precious medicine pills and fled, later succeeding in core formation. As that young master was martial ancestor 3 Yang's sole descendant, he naturally has a bone-deep hatred for the woman and views her as a top priority. So long as you 3 assist me in capturing the woman alive, our sect will be certain to repay you accordingly. We won't leave you undercompensated for your efforts." The old man gritted his teeth as he spoke of the objective. The skeletal man and the fiendish man glanced at each other with a meaningful gaze. As for Han Li, he rubbed his nose in complete silence. So the culprit turned out to be Yuan Yao. This mysterious and beautiful woman's shocking history was far beyond Han Li's imagination. He had been suspicious about how the woman had managed to reach core formation in such a small period of time and why she had acted in such a secretive manner, but he wouldn't have guessed that she had stolen everything from the corpse of a young sect master and was being pursued by the Azure Yang sect. The many precious medicine pills on the young master seemed to have greatly benefited Yuan Yao. But now, it seemed the woman was trapped in a troublesome situation, and vague thoughts of disrupting their plan had sprung into his mind. However, they remained nothing more than thoughts for the moment. While they couldn't be considered to have a particularly close relationship, they could at least be considered acquaintances. At that moment, the skeletal man at his side started to speak. Since we've already received orders from our superiors, my brother and I would have participated regardless. Do you know where this woman appeared? Since we've gathered here, then she mustn't be too far away. Fellow Daoist is right. The witch lives in seclusion on a desolate island north of Bright Emperor Island. When she went out to purchase a few goods, one of our disciples happened to recognize her and followed her back to the island. Up until that moment, we didn't have the slightest idea about where she could be. This woman is extremely cunning and she possesses treasures with tremendous might, not to mention our sect's precious azure flame blasts. As such, everyone should take proper care. When the old man gave his warning, he spoke towards Han Li especially. Since Han Li was a late core formation cultivator, the old man held him in even higher regard than the others. But against their wildest imaginations, while Han Li was expressionlessly nodding his head, he was inwardly pondering whether or not he should exterminate them. However, when Han Li heard that Yuan Yao was located nearby and that she had many precious treasures on hand, his heart stirred. After a mere moment of thought, Han Li decided that after he saved her, he would take the opportunity to demand heavy rewards from her. With the explanation completed, Kuyu finished examining the people in the room and respectfully asked them for confirmation that they understood before setting off from the cave. Somewhere else in the inner seas, a cultivator with disheveled hair glanced down at the transportation formation under his feet with confusion. The transportation had been flickering with light when he had entered, but once he was about to teleport, the formation had lost power for some unfathomable reason. This caused him to gloomily rub the back of his head. He was at a loss of what to do. Leaving behind the people guarding the formations, Han Li and the party arrived on the side of a mountain. In the distance, a village could vaguely be seen. The party of 5 then took to the skies and under the guidance of the Azure Yang sect elder, they left the island and flew north. The flight was uneventful and the party flew in silence. With Han Li's detached and withdrawn mannerisms, none dared to tactlessly chat along the way as he possessed the highest cultivation among them. About half a day later, the group of 5 spotted a small island about 10 kilometers wide ahead of them. A cold light flickered within the old man's eyes as he came to a stop, and coolly said, "This is the place. The witch should be hiding inside one of the hills." Han Li and the others soon came to a stop and gazed at the island in the distance. Apart from some sparse vegetation, there were only a few small stone mountains and the spiritual qi was extremely scarce. After taking a look at the island, the fiendish man couldn't help but doubtfully ask, "Fellow Daoisting, are you not mistaken? The witch is a core formation cultivator. Why would she cultivate in a place like this? Be at ease, there is no way our info is wrong." The old man surnamed Ding replied with complete confidence. He then formed his hands into an incantation gesture and flung his hand out, causing a streak of bright yellow light to streak across the sky. A short moment later, a burst of yellow radiance suddenly shone from one side of the island. The old man was happy after seeing this, and hastily turned his head to the other 3 and explained, "One of our sect's disciples remained here to monitor the woman. It seems that she has yet to leave the island." After that was said, they waited for a moment more before a streak of red light approached them from the direction of the yellow light. A moment later, the red streak of light arrived in front of them and faded away to reveal a grey-clothed mid-foundation establishment cultivator that appeared to be about 40 years old. His robes were identical to the old man's robes with azure flame emblems embroidered into them, but the flames were far smaller than those on the old man's robes. When the man recognized Old Man Ding, he hastily bowed to him and respectfully said, "Disciple greets Martial Uncle Ding and seniors." The old man waved off his greeting without paying it any attention and asked in a deep voice, "Is the witch still on the island?" "She is still there. The witch has yet to leave ever since this disciple tailed her back to this island." The middle-aged man spoke with certainty. The old man spoke with a deep tone, "Good, you've done well in your assignment. When this matter is over, you will be promoted to an inner disciple within the sect. Go ahead and lead the way." When the middle-aged man heard this, he had a rapt smile as he repeatedly thanked the old man. He then turned around and flew to the small island. In the blink of an eye, the party arrived above the small island. The middle-aged man then pointed to a stone mountain and respectfully said, "On the witch's return, this disciple saw her approach that mountain and then disappear without a trace. Although I couldn't investigate closer due to my low cultivation, I reckon that woman's cave residence is inside that mountain." When the skeletal man heard that, a strange light flickered within his eyes as he gazed at the mountain. He then slowly nodded his head and said, "That's right. The mountain's exterior is clearly under the effects of high-level restrictions. Unless one were to examine that particular mountain up close, they wouldn't be able to discover anything strange about the island. It is no wonder why the woman was able to conceal herself here for so many years." After hearing the skeletal man's description of the formation, a scowl momentarily appeared on the old man's face. "Humph! That woman stole all of the young master's technique records during that day, so it isn't strange for her to be able to do this. After I break through the spell formations, I will have to trouble you fellow Taoists to assist me." Relax, even if the woman possesses exceptional powers, it is still impossible for her to escape. The skeletal man smiled and spoke with a careless expression. The old man agreed and clutched his hands in an incantation gesture as a blinding yellow radiance suddenly erupted from his hands. "Break!" As the old man shouted, the yellow radiance left his hands and struck the mountains down below. The blast produced a rumble that echoed throughout the air. The scene of the mountain began to ripple in a manner similar to a large rock suddenly dropping into a serene pond. With a ripple of white light, the scene underwent a massive change, revealing beautiful, verdant mountain along with massive fluctuations of spiritual qi. "This is..." The skeletal and fiendish man gazed at the scene in astonishment and couldn't help becoming dazed with their mouths gaping open. Old man Ding swept his gaze past the two and proudly said, "He, this is my sect's secret spirit constraining formation. It is one of the only spell formations in the world capable of concealing spiritual qi. That witch's cultivation is insufficient and she was only capable of concealing a portion of the spiritual qi. If our own martial ancestor were to personally place down this formation, it would be easy for him to prevent it from leaking even a trace of spiritual qi." Han Li was astonished by this as well, and his heart stirred after hearing the old man's explanation. If he could acquire the method for creating the spirit constraining formation, his cave residences in the future would be far safer. Following the disappearance of the illusion formation, a stone gate was revealed by a pulse of green light at the center of the mountain. It seemed to indicate the location of Yuan Yao's cave residence. "Let's begin our attack." A malicious glint appeared in the old man's eyes. The skeletal man nodded and shot out a strange black edge from his mouth. The weapon was rather odd, appearing to be half saber and half sword. As for the fierce man, he let out a roar and hurled a halberd with an ominous, cold aura towards the mountain. Han Li was shocked to see such a massive weapon being used as a magic treasure. Such a weapon was a rare sight indeed amongst cultivators. The old man had personally spat a white flying sword out of his mouth with a shout. But when he saw that Han Li had yet to take action, he couldn't help but be puzzled and ask, "Fellow Daoist, why haven't you?" Han Li faintly smiled and was about to casually make up an excuse when the mountain door suddenly opened, and a green light burst out from within. When the old man saw this, he wasn't able to say anything further. All the other cultivators' attention had been captured by the sudden change. The green light revolved in front of the gate once before fading away to reveal a black-robed woman who possessed striking beauty and skin as fair as snow. The woman smiled with luminous, moist eyes, and her every movement seemed to contain a trace of charm. This was obviously Yuan Yao, who had parted ways with Han Li after leaving Heaven Void Hall. He hadn't seen the woman for many years, but not only did her appearance remain the same, her charms seemed to possess an even deeper degree of allure. When the woman swept her gaze across the people there, her expression immediately changed upon seeing the Azure Yang sect's elder. A layer of frost suddenly seemed to cover her face. Knowing that her charm techniques would be of no use to the cultivators before her, Yuan Yao's expression quickly grew unsightly. She turned her gaze away from the old man as if in contempt and icily said, "Why have you fellow Taoists arrived at this little woman's residence?" When old man Ding saw this, he grew furious in his heart, but as he was a gloomy and shrewd sort, none of it was revealed on his face. Instead, he sinisterly smiled and said, "Which, there is no point in feigning ignorance. You killed my sect's young master and took his treasures. Do you still believe you can escape?" Yuan Yao didn't bother to respond to the old man, choosing to examine the other cultivators instead. As a result, she felt her heart sink. The old man and the fiendish man were only early core formation cultivators such as herself. However, the skeletal black-robed man and the azure-robed man with the unremarkable appearance would be quite difficult to deal with. Their cultivations were at mid and late core formation, respectively. Despite the astonishing power of the several magic treasures in her possession and the few secret techniques that she had cultivated over the years, if those four were to join hands, the results would be far from good. The skeletal man and the fiendish man were clearly shocked when they saw Yuan Yao's beauty, and gave each other a mutual glance of regret. If the woman hadn't offended the Azure Yang sect's venerable Devil 3 Yang, she would have definitely been an ideal Tao companion. It was truly a pity. As she confronted the dire circumstances before her, her expression remained steady as she bitterly laughed and waved her empty hand. A white light started to revolve around her hand, and when she stroked it, it started to brightly shine and release a large expanse of green and yellow mist. In a mere second, the mist covered the entire mountain. When the old man saw this, he shouted and the flying sword in front of him hastily chopped towards Yuan Yao. However, Yuan Yao merely laughed and silently disappeared into the mist with a blur. The old man frowned when he saw this. Then with an expression of disdain, he clutched his hands in an incantation gesture and pointed at his flying sword. "Humph! You dare to display a trifling illusion formation in front of me." The flying sword released a clear ring before wildly twirling through the skies. In an instant, it turned into a 10-meter-long disc of whirling light that ruthlessly swept past the mountain and cleanly scattered the fog. A second later, the stone gate could be seen once more. When the fiendish man saw this, he pointed to his own magic treasure without the slightest hesitation and caused the halberd to swell in size several times before fiercely chopping at the stone gate. Flashes of yellow and green light erupted each time the halberd struck the gate. To Han Li's side, the skeletal man was about to send his own strange blade to attack when he suddenly shouted in shock, "Not good!" The witch ran from the back of the mountain. "Quickly, chase after her!" He then turned into a streak of black light and quickly flew around the mountain. When Han Li heard this, a strange expression flickered within his eyes, but he stood in place without moving. It appeared the fiendish man was extremely confident in the skeletal man's words. He immediately stopped attacking the gate after hearing his words and set off after him. When the old man saw this, he wore a doubtful expression and hesitantly asked Han Li, "Fellow Daoist, did he speak truly?" This old man didn't sense anything. When Han Li heard him, his face remained unchanged, but an odd expression flickered within his eyes as he calmly said, "That fellow Daoist spoke truthfully. She did flee from an exit on the other side of the mountain. Those two fellow Taoists have already barred her way and are in the middle of a battle with her." Han Li's arms were held behind his back as he gazed into the distance. The old man joyfully said, "That is great. If we arrive to assist them, we will certainly be able to capture that witch." Han Li turned towards the old man and gazed at him with a peculiar expression as he leisurely said, "Yes, if we were to head out, that woman would be easily captured. But before that, there is something I'd like to borrow from you." Old man Ding appeared perplexed and paused for a moment before asking, "Borrow? What does fellow Daoist wish to borrow from me?" "Nothing important. Just your head." Han Li rubbed his nose with a smirk. Then before the old man could respond, he spat a streak of bright azure light from his mouth. It circled once around the old man before his head tumbled off of his body. Soon after, Han Li shot out a streak of azure light from his hand, wrapping up the head and dragging it into his hand. He then narrowed his eyes and enveloped the azure light around the head. Because he had acted so quickly, the head still wore an expression of a strange bewilderment and had yet to even smell of blood. Han Li sighed and muttered, "Don't blame me. Blame the terrible luck you had for seeing me arrive through the transportation formation." When Ku Yu and the Azure Yang sect sentry saw this, They were immediately terrified and tried to hastily flee on their magic tools. Unfortunately for them, a casual wave of Han Li's arm released 2 streaks of sword light that immediately penetrated their chests. He then raised his head and turned to the direction of the mountain while wearing a strange expression. Han Li clicked his tongue and said with an impressed tone, "I didn't expect for Yuan Yao's cultivation to have reached such a higher level." He then flew off in a streak of azure light. In the sky behind the Green Mountain, the skeletal man and the fiendish man were in a contest using their magic treasures against a strange red hammer as they continuously cast magic techniques in Yuan Yao's direction. At that moment, Yuan Yao was completely enveloped in a cloud of black smoke and shot over 100 streaks of green devil fire, intercepting their magic techniques with rings of explosions. But as she fought, she continuously retreated and attempted to think of a plan to flee. As her opponents were rich with battle experience, their perfectly coordinated strikes forced Yuan Yao to focus the entirety of her attention on defending against their attacks. When the fiendish man and the skeletal man saw Han Li flying over, they were overjoyed. When Han Li arrived near the battle and his light faded away, the fiendish man appeared discontent and hastily called out to Han Li, "Fellow Daoist, quickly help. If we attack together, the woman will be captured without fail." Wait, where is fellow Daoist Ding? This was a matter of his own sect, how could he possibly delay? You don't need to wait for him. Fellow Daoist Ding is right here. Han Li then expressionlessly reached behind him and tossed the old man's head to the fiendish man. Chapter 564. A gift. After hearing Han Li's tone suddenly turn harsh, the fiendish man felt that something was amiss. When he saw Han Li had tossed over a severed head, he felt his heart drop, but he unconsciously blurred forward to catch it. In the same instant he moved forward, he clearly saw the severed head's face. He felt his heart quake upon realizing that the pale severed head belonged to Old Man Ding. The skeletal man was similarly aghast when he saw that it was the head of Old Man Ding. With great coordination, the two quickly drew close to one another the instant they discovered the situation had gone awry. They then commanded their magic treasures to return to them before staring at Han Li with vigilant expressions. Although Han Li was a late core formation cultivator, if the two of them joined hands, they could possibly rival him. As a result, they didn't appear to possess the slightest fear. Not far away, Yuan Yao was watching all of this unfold in utter confusion. Despite not using the opportunity to escape, she still maintained the devilish technique that surrounded her body and had her strange red hammer revolve around her out of caution as she silently observed the strange actions of Han Li and the others. Han Li shot a deep glance at Yuan Yao before turning his gaze back to the skeletal man and the fiendish man. Without offering any further explanation, he waved both his arms with a faint smile and over 20 small azure swords flew out from his sleeves like 2 schools of fish. Then in a sudden burst of light, the flying swords shot directly at the pair of cultivators. When the skeletal man and the fiendish man saw this, they couldn't believe their eyes and had incredulous expressions on their faces. Ordinary core formation cultivators had to exhaust most of their fortune just to refine a single magic treasure, and now this traitorous ally before them had suddenly took out over 20 flying swords. With this single display, the two immediately knew that Han Li was no ordinary late core formation cultivator, and didn't stand a chance against him. The skeletal man's expression paled and he suddenly yelled, "Scatter! To each his own!" Just as he finished yelling, he transformed into a black streak of light and flew away. Upon hearing this, the fiendish man immediately retrieved his halberd without another word and rushed away in the opposite direction. His speed wasn't much slower than his partner's. He seemed to be exceptionally proficient in running away. When Han Li saw this, his expression grew solemn, and he quickly formed an incantation gesture with both his hands before pointing to his flying swords. The swords then glowed with azure light before each sword produced 3 identical sword lights, transforming the original 24 swords into 96 and doubling the strength of each of their auras. Han Li then flung his sleeve and imposingly uttered, "Separate." As soon as the word was uttered, the azure swords split off in 2 groups. Each group of flying swords then united together with a pulse of azure light and formed their own distinct swarms of light before swiftly setting off. Han Li's use of the divine ability Sword Shadow Phantasm technique, 1, left the skeletal man and the fiendish man deathly white when they turned their heads around to look. They then began to circulate the entirety of the magic powers in their bodies while fearing for their lives. Han Li stood still and merely glanced at the two with a trace of pity. The swarms of sword lights traveled at a speed that ordinary cultivators couldn't hope to match. Unless they had heaven-defying treasures similar to Han Li's blood-red cloak or thunderstorm wings, the two of them didn't have the slightest chance of survival. After only a short moment, the swarms of swordlight had traveled several kilometers away and chased down the skeletal man and the fiendish man. They could only helplessly turn around and summon their magic treasures in an attempt to block the sword swarms. But under the overbearing assault of their superior numbers, the swords tore their bodies apart in quick succession, each death accompanied by a miserable scream. Han Li then calmly released the sword shadow phantasm technique, and had the swords fly back with the now ownerless storage pouches. With the swords flying back into his robes like birds returning to their nest, Han Li turned to look at the black mist in the distance with a mysterious smile. To his surprise, before he even spoke, Yuan Yao giggled and said, "So it's fellow Daoist Han. I didn't expect that in the tens of years we were apart Brother Han's abilities would reach this stage. This little woman truly holds you in great esteem." Soon after she said this, the black mist slowly dispersed to reveal the stunningly beautiful woman. She then silently gazed at Han Li with luminous eyes and a wide smile. "I didn't expect for fellow Daoist Yuan to recognize me. You gave me quite the fright." Han Li chuckled and then dissolved his appearance exchange arts without hesitation, restoring his original appearance in a flash of white light. "I, myself, find it quite difficult to believe that apart from Brother Han, there could be another person in the scattered star seas that also possesses such a vast number of flying sword magic treasures." Although she had said those earlier words with a smile, she still let out a breath of relief after seeing Han Li reveal his true appearance. Then after a moment of hesitation, she refrained from asking why Han Li had appeared here. Instead, she approached Han Li and gracefully saluted him, expressing her sincere gratitude. "It is thanks to Brother Han's timely rescue that this little woman was able to escape calamity." She truly understood that if Han Li had meant her harm, she wouldn't have even been given the opportunity to flee given his current cultivation. As such, it would be far better if she could forge a friendly relationship with him. Han Li naturally knew why Yuan Yao had showed him respect with such a strong smile. As such, he chuckled and waved his arm before saying, "I merely happened to encounter this hunting party by chance, and saving you only required very slight effort. Since we last saw each other, it seems fellow Daoist Yuan has made quite a bit of progress with her techniques." Yuan Yao tilted her head and glanced at Han Li before speaking with feigned anger. "Is Brother Han making fun of this little woman? Brother Han has already reached late core formation stage while I am still lingering at early core formation stage. What progress is there to speak of? He. Fellow Daoist Yuan is far too modest. Although I've managed to reach this stage with the assistance of many chance encounters, there are still several matters that I must consult with you about." Yuan Yao was momentarily stunned before concealing a giggle with her hand. He. "Ask as you please. But if Brother Han doesn't find my humble home distasteful, wouldn't it be better to have our chat there?" The woman treated Han Li with obvious intimacy, perhaps due to him having just saved her life. Without putting on any airs, Han Li saluted her and agreed, "Then I will have to trouble you to lead the way." Yuan Yao's complexion flushed and she descended onto the island with a smile on her face as Han Li followed her into her cave residence. Yuan Yao's cave residence couldn't be considered very large, but it was tastefully arranged in an elegant and clean manner. Additionally, the residence's passageways were lined with rare and colorful plants, filling the ordinarily dull cave residence with color and a pleasant fragrance. When Han Li saw this, he couldn't help but warmly smile as Yuan Yao led Han Li into a stone hall over 30 meters wide. After Han Li took a seat at the table, she steeped a pot of fragrant tea and happily sat across from Han Li. "Brother Han is quite famous within the scattered star seas. You've acquired quite the reputation. Nearly everyone has heard of how the top-ranked secret treasure in the scattered star seas fell into the hands of a core formation cultivator surnamed Han. Judging by how fellow Daoist entered late core formation in so few years, could it be that you have consumed the legendary Heaven-Mend pill? Is the medicine truly as miraculous as the legends say?" As soon as Yuan Yao sat down, she revealed an unconcealed longing towards both the Heaven-Mend pill and the Heaven Void cauldron. Han Li paused for a moment before silently smiling. The woman was quite clever. She clearly had taken the opportunity to raise the matter of the Heaven Void Cauldron and the Heaven Mend Pill without showing any hostile intentions. Han Li couldn't help but feel favorable towards her. Han Li sighed and shook his head. Since fellow Daoist Yuan mentioned it, I won't try to fool you. The Heaven Void Cauldron really is in my possession. However, due to my shallow cultivation, I've been unable to open the cauldron ever since I acquired it. Whatever treasures it contains are completely inaccessible to me for the time being. By the time my cultivation progresses and I have the ability to open it, the Heaven Mend Pill will no longer be of any use to me. Since his cultivation far exceeded her own, he didn't feel the need to lie and calmly revealed the truth of the matter. You've yet to open the Heaven Void Cauldron. When Yuan Yao heard this, she paused for a moment, before revealing an expression of slight disbelief. Han Li frowned and was disinclined to offer the woman any further explanation. Instead, he coughed several times and decided to clearly strike at the heart of the matter at hand. He stared at Yuan Yao and slowly said, "Would fellow Daoist Yuan happen to have any more myriad spirit milk on her? You should know that with the Heaven Void Cauldron in my possession, trouble has a way of constantly finding me. This, along with many other unexpected matters, has caused me to consume nearly all the myriad year spirit milk that you gave me. If you have any of it remaining, I am willing to pay a high price for it. You definitely won't suffer a loss." Han Li would have lost his life several times over during his time in the Outer Star Seas, were it not for the myriad year spirit milk. After realizing just how important this item was, Han Li was naturally unwilling to let go an opportunity to acquire the other half of the spirit milk originally in the bottle. With this, he would have yet another life-saving item the next time danger came to seek him out. When Yuan Yao heard Han Li, she paused for a moment before unconsciously frowning. A moment later, she took out a jade bottle from her waist and placed it at the center of the table and pushed it towards Han Li without any hesitation. The woman serenely gazed at Han Li and said, "I haven't used even a drop of the myriad year spirit milk. Brother Han can have it as a gift, so there is no need to give me any spirit stones or items for it." 1. First introduced in Chapter 217. It is a technique that allows swords to produce an illusory copy of themselves. At his current strength, each of the sword illusions are able to retain 1/3 of the power of the original weapon. Chapter 565. The other side of the story, you're giving the myriad year spirit milk to me as a gift. Han Li was astonished upon hearing her. That's right. Although the myriad year spirit milk could be considered extremely precious, it cannot be compared with Brother Han's life-saving rescue. Could it be that Brother Han believes that I am the sort of woman who doesn't know how to repay kindness? Yuan Yao bit her lip as she started to twirl a fine strand of hair around her finger. Han Li was hesitant as he said, "No, it's just..." When Yuan Yao heard this, her eyes brightened and she smiled. "We are fellow survivors of Heaven Void Hall, and now you've saved my life once again. There is no need for Brother Han to address me as an outsider and always call me fellow Daoist." Yuan Yao chuckled after saying this, but she soon thought of something and a blush appeared on her face, emphasizing her beauty. When Han Li saw her captivating expression, he couldn't help but blankly stare at her for a time. Yuan Yao's blush deepened when she saw Han Li staring at her, turned her head to the side as if to avoid his gaze. A while later, Han Li took a deep breath and said, "Since Miss Yuan Yao has said this, I won't act so unfamiliar and will call you by your esteemed name." He then casually picked up the small bottle and opened it to see that it was truly the myriad year spirit milk. With a trace of joy, Han Li placed the bottle into his storage pouch. Then after some slight hesitation, Han Li took out 2 small, white jade bottles and pushed them towards Yuan Yao. Yuan Yao blinked and said with slight confusion, "What are those?" Han Li calmly replied, "These 2 bottles contain medicine pills for progressing one's magic power, and will assuredly aid you in your future cultivation. Consider them as an exchange of gifts." Yuan Yao paused for a moment and then pursed her lips in a smile as she looked at the 2 white jade bottles. "I've already said that the spirit milk was a present to you, but Brother Han still took out 2 bottles of medicine pills to give me. You're making me quite embarrassed." Han Li glanced at her and smiled before saying, "There is no need for Miss Yuan to feel embarrassed. These 2 bottles of medicine pills were refined from the cores of grade 6 demon beasts. With Miss Yuan's current cultivation at the peak of early core formation stage, these pills will allow you to smoothly enter the mid-core formation stage. Yuan Yao's smile suddenly turned into an expression of shock. Medicine pills refined from grade 6 demon cores. She immediately grabbed a bottle and opened the lid. Pure spiritual qi was released from the bottle, much to Yuan Yao's delighted surprise. Yuan Yao's hand tightly held onto the bottle and said in an embarrassed manner, "I could refuse anything else, but due to desperation, I'm afraid that this little woman will have to shamefully accept these 2 bottles of medicine pills." The 2 bottles of medicine pills would save Yuan Yao over 10 years of bitter cultivation, so although she felt slightly embarrassed, she was still very much delighted. "Please, don't hesitate to take them. I still have other things to request of you." Han Li felt relief after seeing Yuan Yao take the medicine pills. Otherwise, he would have found it difficult to put forward his next request. After carefully putting away the 2 bottles, Yuan Yao felt even more relaxed towards Han Li, and her expression only grew more lovely. With Brother Han's current powers, what could Brother Han possibly require from this little woman? "Let me know and I will certainly help if I can." Han Li slowly said, "Just now I was amazed when I saw the Azure Yang sect's secret spirit constraining formation. It was able to restrain the spiritual qi surrounding your cave residence. Would Miss Yuan be able to give me a copy of the method to create this formation spell? I would be extremely grateful." The spirit constraining formation? Not a problem. Perhaps wishing to repay Han Li for the medicine pills, Yuan Yao instantly agreed without the slightest consideration. She immediately took out a jet-black jade slip and handed it to Han Li. Yuan Yao sweetly smiled in a breathtaking display of her dainty charms. This jade slip contains the formation spell records of the Azure Yang sect. In addition to the spirit constraining formation, there are several other powerful spell formations as well. Han Li was elated to accept the jade slip and uttered several words of thanks before immersing his spiritual sense in it. Just as Yuan Yao had said, there were several spell formations that he had never heard of in addition to the spirit constraining formation. After quickly looking through the contents, Han Li withdrew his spiritual sense from the jade slip with a satisfied expression. When he thought to say something to Yuan Yao, he was surprised to see that she appeared hesitant about whether or not she should speak. With a trace of doubt on his face, Han Li asked, "Is there something you want to ask me, Miss Yuan?" Yuan Yao hesitated before revealing an expression of determination, and calmly asked, "Since Brother Han already knows about the Azure Yang sect, then you should also know a bit about my past, yes?" A bewildered expression appeared on Han Li's face at the suddenly change of topic. Not knowing why she has raised the issue, he indifferently nodded and sullenly said, "That's right. When I infiltrated their group, I heard the Azure Yang sect elder say that you had nearly become the young sect master's concubine. Afterwards, you killed the young master in secret and fled with his treasures. Is that true?" When she heard Han Li's brief summary, a bitter smile appeared on Yuan Yao's beautiful face. With a mocking tone, she said, "He wasn't wrong. I really did nearly become that wretch's concubine, and I did it with the intention of gaining the Azure Yang sect as a powerful backer. Do you believe that my actions displayed a lack of pride or honor, Brother Han?" Han Li shook his head and emotionlessly said, "Not in the slightest. That's just how the cultivation world works. If you aren't born into a large sect or if you lack exceptional spiritual roots, it's extremely difficult to progress on the path of cultivation. That being the case, your methods are basically par for the course. Most beautiful female cultivators are more than willing to become the concubine or servant of high-grade male cultivators in the hopes of acquiring support. There are even a few female cultivators that have given up on cultivation completely and become cultivation furnaces for others, merely looking for a period of luxury free of worry." Han Li's words seemed to make Yuan Yao feel more at ease. She then forced a smile at Han Li and said, "Senior Martial Sister Yang Li, 1, and I were both born in a small cultivation sect. Not only were our aptitudes only average, but our cultivation techniques were mediocre as well. We both realized if things continued like they were, we wouldn't even catch a glimpse of foundation establishment stage, let alone core formation. As a result, we both agreed to leave our sect and wanted to find an unmarried male cultivator with profound cultivation in hopes of becoming their Tao companion. Unfortunately, we never encountered a suitable high-grade cultivator, not even one at late foundation establishment stage. Instead, our beauty attracted many undesirables like flies to fruit, but since their cultivations weren't superior to our own, we were unwilling to devote our hearts to them. Later on, due to a few unforeseen events, Senior Marshal's sister Yang Li and I parted ways for a time. Several years later, when I reunited with her, I discovered that she had become the cultivation furnace for the Azure Yang sect's young master. I was shocked and furious at the time and wanted to investigate it, but at that moment, the Azure Yang sect's young master suddenly appeared and started to repeatedly say how attracted he was to me and how he wanted me to be his concubine. I accepted his terms on the condition that he release Senior Marshal's sister Yang Li and also wed her as a concubine. But during those years, I was young and short-sighted. Based on the wretch's illustrious identity, deep cultivation, and great riches, I agreed without much consideration despite the protests of my Senior Marshal sister. At this point Yuan Yao wore a dazed expression as if she were lost in her memories of that year. Han Li slightly furrowed his brow, but knowing that she was about to continue, he silently waited. After Yuan Yao woke from her daze, his voice grew icy as she continued. On our way back to the Azure Yang sect, Senior Marshal sister Yang Li found an opportunity to secretly tell me that she had originally been duped by the Azure Yang sect's young master. She had also been promised to be wed as a concubine, but she had instead become the wretch's cultivation furnace several months later and was greatly sapped of her strength. It seemed that most of his cultivation vessels had been cheated in nearly the same way. After they entered the Azure Yang sect, these female cultivators that were promised to be concubines had all become cultivation vessels and were stripped of their freedom. When I heard that, I became fearful and began to consult with Senior Marshal's sister about taking advantage of the wretch when he was unguarded to stealthily dispose of him. But who could have known that this ravenous wretch wished to consummate our marriage before we even managed to return to the sect? Helpless, my Senior Marshal sister and I could only lay down a trap and take advantage of his moment of weakness. In the end, the plan succeeded. However, my Senior Marshal sister Yang Li suffered an immense injury and lost her body. All I could do for her was take her primal soul and temporarily house it in a magic tool, but ordinary ghost magic tools cause the soul to decay within only days. Later on, I used all the techniques I could to slow this degradation, but I was never able to stop it. Soon, Senior Marshal sister Yang Li's primal soul was at risk of losing her intelligence and being forever incapable of bonding with a body. Having heard this, Han Li's eyes brightened as he recalled the matter of the spirit-nurturing wood. Could it be that you acquired the soul-nurturing wood in order to protect fellow Daoist Yang Li's soul? 1. Yang Li first appeared in chapter 375. She was the dainty woman who accompanied Yuan Yao.